Welcome to the Empowered to Connect podcast, where we come together to discuss a healing-centered approach to engagement and well-being for ourselves, our families, and our communities. I'm JD Wilson, and I am your host. And today on the show, we deviate from a regular scheduled episode that we had today to talk about something that has been on our hearts recently and just for a few weeks. What do we do when parenting gets to be too much, when it is too hard, when we hit those walls where it feels like nothing's going right and we just are having a time? We talk about that today with Mo and Tona. And rather than preview the content, I'll just say, if you're in it right now, it may be too much to listen to it if you are in the moment, in a hard moment, or it may be exactly what you need. You be the judge, but I will tell you that this was a particularly therapeutic for me, just having our family been in a tough place recently. It was very freeing and encouraging to have this episode with Mo and Tona. And so without any further ado, here's Mo and Tona and myself talking about when parenting gets too difficult. Well, today Mo and Tona are with me, and we were talking earlier before we recorded about another topic which we will revisit at some time that we had planned on talking about this week, and we all just kind of felt it pertinent to stop and just kind of have an episode where we talk from the heart for a day. Well, let's just talk about when parenting is hard, when it's difficult, and when we'll keep it profanity free, but it's just when it feels
maybe profanity free.
When it feels tough. Why don't you guys kind of start off sharing where you are, what's on your heart, and then I'll chime in as well.
I don't mind getting us started. We were talking a few minutes ago about, like, sometimes it's important just to show up in this, podcast sphere with those that are such faithful listeners in a spirit of like tenderness and authenticity. And so definitely coming today, just tender. I think that's the spirit that I'm in. And, the three of us, and Mo and I specifically, it's just been a hard week. It's been a hard few weeks, personally for our family, just supporting some kids through some things. And then, the privilege that it is and the honor that it is to get to walk hand in hand and in spaces and places alongside other families. And there are just so many people around us that are in the throes of it and hurting and having a hard time. And so that feels personally a little bit like it ebbs and flows, sort of the people around us and the seasons of life that they're in, and then us personally. And so, like you said, we had another topic, and we just couldn't come to that topic today and like show up in any sort of honest way. And so let's just talk about like when it's hard, and it's not always hard. And so if you're like in a season of parenting right now and you were about to start listening to this episode and that's not where you are, like, that's okay. Maybe you can like hit save on this one and come back in a season when things are not going maybe super smoothly. But, we've been parenting a long time, and it's not always rainbows and butterflies and sunshine. Sometimes seasons are more difficult than others.
And I think it's important to remember there are seasons, and all of us have seasons. And, there are just days where you're going to bed at night and you put your head on your pillow and you feel like, oh man, we're in a good spot. And then there's days where you're just like, gosh, we're struggling. And, I just, I think coming today and just, I just think about, just being ready for those seasons, knowing that they're coming, knowing that we need to do all we can as parents to I'm just grateful that we don't live in isolation. We don't live alone. We don't live like dadgum, we're on a podcast now talking about, man, things are hard. And I just, I think I've just been struck with the appreciation of those close to us and those that have walked with us with our kids and those that we get to walk with and just gosh, I just don't know how I can say it enough for those, if you're listening, just the need to live authentically and humbly in this field of parenting, this area of parenting and I think I'm just kind of coming in this reflective space right now.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of laughed at, or I laughed at you saying like, oh, well, we're coming on a podcast now, but we know, the three of us know this can very easily be the mask.
Right.
Be on a podcast and being like, oh, it's so hard, but God, it's good. Everything's right. Blah, blah, blah. And just sort of glide through that. If we put up the facade publicly, maybe it'll come true privately. Or if we put up the facade publicly, no one will think anything is going on. And, so I think just one disclaimer for those of you who are like, yeah, so share some stuff. I will also say, we can share our kind of honest experiences, but it's not our right or our responsibility to then out stories in our home. Right. Yeah. And to like allow our homes to be sacred places where, for example, my kids are not worried about, oh, great, now Dad's going to tell a story in the podcast, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, the stuff of scarring, right? Those are wounds and trauma that sticks for a while and that has to work through. So I would say, just if you're listening to this, rolling your eyes because now we're not sharing specifics. That's why. And maybe that's kind of our first topic of conversation is like, how do we walk through something like through a really hard season and be transparent with the people that we need to be transparent with, the people closest to us, without creating a breach of trust with our kid? Like if we've got to share something really hard that's going on, but we don't want to out the stories of our kids, how do we begin navigating that?
Yeah. I think it's important first for us as parents to realize, and maybe you're baby brand new parent and you're starting to listen and learn and think about parenting early on in your journey, or maybe you're deep into the weeds of it. But what we know to be true is if you've been parenting for more than 5 minutes, there is going to be hurt and hard times in the parenting journey, because we're trying to figure out, what does it mean to provide a home for other human beings? And so there are seasons of parenting that are hard, period. Then if you layer on some other things to the journey of parenthood, whether that is parenting maybe a child with mental illness or physical illness, or a child with disabilities, or one with a fragile nervous system, or parenting a child that has experienced loss or tragedy or trauma, a child that's come to you through adoption or foster care, where they may have some attachment wounds. Like all of those things make the parenting journey a unique environment in and of itself. And so first, whatever you're experiencing, you're not alone. So JD, you asked, like, how do you approach talking about hard times without jeopardizing your child's trust or privacy? Like that's something that we all need to figure out and think about. And it's going to change scenario to scenario, child to child. Right. But I think like the overarching thing is all parents have hard times, period. Nobody's hard time is trumps anybody else's. I remember a season when one of our kiddos was in the hospital for a really long time, and I felt like a downer everywhere I went because I thought like, oh, I'm going to have like the hardest parenting story in the room. And I remember a girlfriend one time was like, Tana, I feel bad even talking to you about like what's going on with us because it doesn't seem as difficult as the season you're walking through. And I was like, let's full stop this conversation. Like that we're not here to like trump one another or compare life struggles. Like first, let's just say that we can be vulnerable and humble and support each other wherever we are. So we don't always have to give the details to share what's going, like how we're experiencing the moment.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what does it look like to foster community where we can let the mask down and do that in a way that is safe and non-judgmental, and we're willing to hear and learn from each other without having to have all the nitty-gritty. So first, we all go through hard seasons, and we can learn from each other and be open to that conversation without there having to be this like weird comparison. And I think sometimes we overshare because we're trying to like validate our experiences.
Right.
Well, I'm going to talk to you about what does it mean to build trust. And I'm going to tell you all the things that have happened in my family so that I'm sort of have the banner of being worthy to be heard.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, what's your motivation for sharing? Mo, what would you add to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think so often, I mean, gosh, I want to be careful how I say it. Like, I hate to use the word pet peeve, but like I feel like there are those that just want to share and bitch because that's what they just want to do. And they share way too much, and they're really not coming to get answers. They just kind of want to trump everything. And so that's, I mean, I think, and I don't think it's I think authentically being real and being honest, I think, Tana, the way you said it was, I don't have to share details to say that, man, I am deeply hurt, or I am deeply sad, or man, I am struggling because I feel like I'm a terrible dad, or gosh, I'm really struggling with a kiddo. Like, we're just not seeing eye to eye, or I just don't know what to do, or on and on. Like, there can be a way of not demeaning a child. Like, I just think so much of it is honoring the child while you are processing your own things. And so, I mean, I think that's like, I'll be honest. I think if you're having to throw the kid under the bus, you're not really trying to get into the heart of what's going on.
That's right.
And like, you know, if I'm sitting down with you, JD, and we're talking, like, I'm talking about, gosh, the shame that I'm feeling because of something, or I don't know why that triggered me so bad, or I don't know why I responded that bad, that, you know, I'm trying to be attuned. I'm trying to be thoughtful to what's going on with me.
Yeah.
And the goal is not to get sympathy from you or empathy from you to say, oh, gosh, that kid's just so bad.
Right.
You know? And so, yeah. And so,
well, if I could jump into that too, I think, you know, this gets really tricky thinking about being in faith communities also, right? Because there are times we feel the need, and this is hand up, like, as someone who grew up pastor's grandson, and like, we were in church all the time, nonstop. It's a really slippery slope, and it's very easy. So this is not a condemnation. This is like an acknowledgement. It is extremely, extremely easy to slip into the world of never sharing anything either, right? So you can get into the mode of saying things are tough. Like, you do the how are you sandwich, you know, we're good. I mean, things are a little bit hard at home, but you know, overall, like, gosh, sun's shining, winds blowing, we're good. We're good. Yep. And the danger there is that you never get to hear me too from anybody else. You never get to hear, oh gosh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Or you never get to experience that. Like, there's a transformative power in relationship when you're able to just say without qualification, we're really struggling. Here's some feelings that I've had this week about stuff that's been going on in our home. and to not qualify it and look across the table at somebody and they just sit there with you. And then they're there to be able to support you in that. And I mean, I was there recently, like, well, before I say this is also not for everybody. Like, not everybody gets to get your vulnerability. Not everybody gets to get your complete and utter honesty when it comes to how you're doing, because without context, that information can get wildly misconstrued or assumptions are drawn, right? So this does become a really slippery slope. And it's the need for authentic, deep, real, kind of long-formed, trusted relationships. And, I would say that's why it's usually easiest for these things to happen between parenting partners, right? Like if you are living in the home with a spouse, if you live in the home with a grandparent or an aunt, uncle, a sibling, somebody who is helping you raise your kids, and stuff is frustrating, you don't usually have to qualify with the other person that you're parenting with why something's frustrating or hard or why you're feeling it. Sometimes with friends, like you get to a level of trust where you can sit down and say without any kind of qualification, we're having a really hard time. Like we really are. We are struggling pretty bad. And I've had that recently, like within the last couple of weeks, sat down and I was speaking personally, just said like, man, I don't know what it is. I feel sad right now. I don't know why I can't shake that feeling. And because the person I was sharing that with knows our family deeply, and we've been in close relationship for a very long time and have kind of gradually gotten to the place of sharing vulnerable with each other. By the end of that conversation, I walked home feeling like I had some answers and feeling seen and feeling known. And it wasn't like this person just unloaded advice on me, but just sat and listened and said, well, let me just, can I say something? Like something you're bringing up right now reminds me of something I've heard recently. And so all that said, those things happen out of deep relationships. Somebody you met Sunday in the pew, like calling them, being like, hey, I want to share something like that might not go the same direction. Right.
Well, I think ditto to both of that. A thought that just crossed my mind, and Mo, I was thinking about it. JD, you just hinted on it. I think we have choices to make in how we're cultivating relationships and people, and you can let people in, and you can let people in too far, and you can keep people out. And the tricky thing, I do believe the hardest thing to do is in the middle of struggle to have a moment of courage and to be brave and to let somebody come into the reality of what you're going through. Because Mo, like the example you gave was sort of oversharing about the kids in order to put a hedge of protection around what's really going on with you. Mm-hmm. So it's all about the children and what's going on with the kids. And it's the problem lies in, X, Y, and Z, and you're deferring vulnerability. Or you isolate, which is another version of like deferring vulnerability. So when we are in seasons of struggle, it's almost like you've got to cultivate those safe friendships when it's not hard, so that when it gets hard, they're there. So just cultivate it in the fun and easy times, but be real so that they're ready to walk through it with you when it's really hard. Because both of them are isolating. Both of them are keeping people at arm's length. It's just two different versions of that.
Yeah. Well, and you just said courage. I mean, parenting takes courage. Yeah. It takes courage to be humble. It takes courage to be willing to learn. It takes courage to admit that, there may be a different way. It takes courage to be vulnerable with your children, be vulnerable with the reality of, man, I need help. I think, we were talking earlier, just some friends of ours that have been parenting a few years longer than us, and just the faithfulness and just the steadfastness of walking with their kids and the courage it's taken. And I think that's what I think if I had to, look every parent in the eye, it was have the courage, have the long game in mind, that, there are going to be lonely days. There's going to be hard days. But, I'm going to do what I need to do for the sake of my kiddo and for the sake of my home and the sake of the family. And that may have to do the courageous thing of changing parenting styles. It could mean having a hard conversation with a spouse or a parent. It could mean having a hard conversation or a hard decision to switch schools or switch churches or switch, there's just things, it takes, I think I'm just asking for some courageous parents to kind of rise up and say, man, I'm going to be the adult, and it may mean the courage to look at some past hurt and trauma and pain in your own life that has gone unresolved, that maybe parenting is bringing to the surface. We often say the buttons that are being pressed by our kiddos, and you have run from that pain or trauma your whole life. And for the sake of your children and your home and your family, it's time to step into that and begin to begin that healing path so that you can help your child on their healing path as well. So just
Mo, can I add to that?
Yeah.
Also for yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh man. Like if you're listening, and I know this is a short episode, you're like, oh, they brought a lot to this. And we did, because we're hurting, and the people that we love and care about, some of our closest, dearest people are hurting. And if I could say anything, I would say, if you are having a hard time, if you are waking up in the morning or going to bed at night and you don't like the mom and the dad that you are, like if you are saying to yourself, I never thought I would get here. And, in those places of like, there's so much empathy and compassion that can grow deep roots for deep, honest, authentic relationships and community. Like when we get to the humblest part of ourselves, the part of ourselves that we didn't even know we would get to, I think there is so much beauty and growth and vulnerability and deep healing that can happen in and among each other when we get to our hardest and darkest spots. But you, dear sweet parent, are worthy of care. Like it is okay to not be okay. It is okay to think, I didn't know I would get here, and this isn't who I wanted to be. Like the honesty of admitting that is so tender and so vulnerable, but you're not alone. I think any parent that's willing to be honest can empathize in that place of authenticity. So just, we believe here at Empowered to Connect that, there's a saying, children do the best that they can. I also believe that adults and human beings are doing the best that we can. So if you are hearing this, use any little bit of resilience or strength or energy you have and just make a phone call. Do a coffee, do a lunch, find somebody that you can practice vulnerability with, and just risk saying, things aren't going great, and I wish that it was going differently at home right now. And then use the next little bit of, the little bit of energy that will give you to go get some support. Get on the phone with a therapist, get a counselor, take care of yourself, find some healthy coping skills. Like, we do need to do it for our children, but I promise you, the journey that Mo and I have gone on personally and in our marriage and in our home, sometimes early on, it probably was motivated by the kids. We didn't even know that we needed personally the journey that we were being invited onto for the sake of our children. I am so grateful that we have done the work that we've done and that we still get to do the work ahead. Right. There's no arrival. There's no No, let's just like all expectations aside. There's no like, oh, do this work and you arrive. No. The work is arriving.
Yeah.
The vulnerability and courage is the thing that you're working towards. Like, it's all there is. There's no perfect parenting. There's no ultimate skill or strategy. It's humility and a growth mindset and just being vulnerable to share the scary, hard part of it all and be willing to say, I'm not okay and I need help.
Yeah.
That's all, I guess, really, I say that's all there is. Just saying you're not okay and you need some help.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because, our parenting curriculum, Cultivate Connection, like all the work that went into writing that, creating that, the years that went into that. And we've got, however 100 plus facilitators all over the place teaching that. And the material is unbelievable. But when people get feedback on the class, it is always parents sitting with other parents and realizing I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And I just, parents, you're not alone. You're not alone on this journey, and don't isolate.
And there's so much obviously to go further into that with, but I feel like that's the gateway. And that's the thing we're talking about today, right? Like that's the message today.
Hey, and we didn't intend to, like, again, we totally did an audible here, but I also, for those that are listening that are like, I just need help and I don't know how to get help in my community. I mean, maybe I'm not supposed to say this yet, but we do. we have a parent coaching that we have launched this month, and we're beta testing it, and we've gotten a national grant to do this, and this fall we will be looking for 40 other families. So, I just want to say, if you would like to do an 8 to 10 week, get on Zoom. For those of you that are all over the place and need support, we would love to help. So,
yeah.
We'll
put
parenting.
Yeah, we will put all that information out through our social media, the website, et cetera, once it becomes live. But we are excited about that. And hopefully for those of you who are, staring down a really hard assignment right now and not sure, where to go, like pretty soon we've got your back, Mo, any more thoughts before we close out today?
No, I just want to encourage parents, stay the course. I mean, you need it. Your kids need it. They need parents that are growing and learning, humble, and seek help if you need help. Seek resources. Obviously, that's what Power to Connect creates, is resources, making it accessible to people. So, just begin watching videos and listen to podcasts and find your friends and take the next right step. Take the next right step.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, y'all. Well, I'll just say thank you to Mo and Tona for their vulnerability and transparency and just kind of some guidelines on how to reach out, how to build community, how to access your community when you're struggling, and ways to do that without defaming your kids or kind of oversharing and what they're going through. So keeping your kids' honor intact while also being a part of community is so important. So thanks to Mo and Tona. For Kyle Wright, who edits and engineers all of our audio, for Mo and Tona Ottinger, for Tad Jewett, the creator of the music behind the Empowered to Connect podcast, I'm JD Wilson, and we will see you next week on the Empowered to Connect podcast.